We humans are chumps. And then there's them. The gods. Gods are ultra-powerful beings that can make their presence known to us in incredible ways. Sometimes they appear in the form of a very convenient plague, other times as an amorous swan, and occasionally as an epic meow catch just outside Pallet Town. However, these events are very rare. As a general rule, deities don't interact with us. Why are they so aloof? Why don't we see these miracles every day? Some think it's because they're disappointed, while others think they're testing our faith and will reward our loyalty in the next life. But the truth is that they couldn't care less about us. We bore them. They have much more entertaining things to do than impress us. Of all the powers gods are born with, their favorite has always been the ability to see everything. As we saw in the previous video, humans experience what happens around us in a limited way. We can't see what's happening in the present moment. Since light and sound take a while to reach us, our perception of the world is somewhat delayed and even a bit distorted. An illusion makes moving objects seem longer or shorter than they really are. Check out the video. But that's not a problem for the gods. As all-seeing beings, they sense everything. They can see everything that's going on in the cosmos at that very instant without the need for messengers. They, unlike us, can perceive the present. Naturally, the gods are so curious and so eager to explore how the universe works that coming down to Earth is far less appealing than floating around scrutinizing every corner of space. You might say they prefer contemplation to action. This fabulous power really went to their heads. Since we're losers who can't perceive the present, the gods thought they were far superior to us. That is, until Albert Einstein came along. He showed us that the gods aren't as good at seeing the present as they boast. It's all kind of relative. Listen up. Let's imagine we have a moving rocket. Inside at either end of the ship are two guys, each with a light bulb. They've agreed to switch on their light bulbs when their watches mark 12 o'clock. When one sees the other guy's light, he'll holler. If a goddess were watching this, she'd see a coordinated dance. The bulbs turn on at the same time, the light travels symmetrically through the rocket, and the two people yell in unison. However, if a third person were watching, well, the light from one end would probably reach him faster than the other, so he'd end up seeing one bulb turn on first and the yells wouldn't be coordinated. Basically, chaos. A false vision of reality, unlike mine, the goddess would say. But she'd be wrong about the last part. Now imagine that another deity decided to watch, floating motionless in space. You'd think you would see the same thing as the goddess. The light bulbs come on simultaneously, the light travels through the rocket, and the guys at the two ends yell in unison. However, we're forgetting something. In order for the light beams to travel in sync with the rocket, one would have to move faster than the speed of light and the other slower. If you throw a ball inside a moving train to an outside observer, it looks like the ball is moving at its own speed plus the speed of the train. The same thing should apply to these light beams, except for the fact that Einstein knew this was impossible, because light doesn't behave like a ball on a train. If I shoot a light beam inside, I'd measure its speed at about 300,000 kilometers per second, but if I measure it from the outside, I'd find it's also moving at about 300,000 kilometers per second. The train speed is irrelevant. How did Einstein know that? First of all, he knew it because nobody in his day had managed to measure, directly or indirectly, a light beam traveling at any speed other than 300,000 kilometers per second, no matter how many wrenches they threw in the works, which was quite suspicious. And secondly, he knew it because the equations that govern electromagnetism, equations discovered through experiments, suggest that the speed of light was special. It never changed. Today, tons of tests have confirmed this beyond any doubt. It makes no difference if the observer is a human or a goddess, standing still, riding a skateboard, or traveling in a rocket ship. All observers moving at a constant velocity measure that light beams move at the same pace. This is the principle of invariant light speed, one of the two pillars of special relativity. And in order for this principle to hold true and for everyone to measure light the same way, regardless of how much they move, the structure of space-time has to change according to speed. Let's return to the rocket. If we take all of this seriously, the God outside the ship should see both light beams inside the rocket moving at the speed of light, unaffected by the ship's motion. This means that one beam arrives before the other, and the guy at one end yells before the other. Inside, in sync. Outside, off beat. But let me clarify something. Deities don't actually see or hear. They just perceive what happens. If the goddess traveling with the ship perceives that the yells are simultaneous, it's because they're happening at the same time. But if the god outside the ship perceives the one comes before the other, it's because one is happening before the other. This isn't an illusion that depends on the observer. No messenger can warp a deity's perception, and yet these two events occur differently for each divine being. This is the universe's way of making sure we all measure light at the same speed. Depending on how fast you're moving, the structure of space and time changes, altering the order of events. It literally modifies the definition of the present. More specifically, what the mathematics of relativity show us is that a goddess in motion, in relation to a motionless god, perceives things that have already happened behind her and things that will happen in front of her. The farther ahead she gazes, the further into the future she goes, and the farther she looks back, the deeper she goes into the past. And this reminds me of something. When we look around us, we can only perceive the past. The farther we look, the further back in time we go. This is exactly why moving objects seem to expand or contract before our eyes. So, shouldn't gods experience something similar? Let's go back to the rocket again. The goddess inside can use the yells to calculate the length of the rocket. Once they happen, she measures the distance between them, and that's that. But the god outside doesn't have it so easy. He can't use the two yells as benchmarks because one happens after the other, and he knows he'd get a skewed measurement if he followed the same procedure. So he has to use the first yell as one benchmark, and the tip of the rocket at that precise instant as the second. Problem, as the second yell hasn't happened yet. The tip of the rocket the god perceives is actually in the past, and the rocket in the past was further back. So the distance measured by the god outside the ship is less than that measured by the goddess inside it. People, this is Lorentz contraction. Lorentz contraction doesn't mean that rockets and distances simply shrink. It's a byproduct of altering the present, a phenomenon similar to what we experience with light or sound, but there are two differences. One, and I'll say it again, this contraction is not an optical illusion. The rocket is shorter. It's not something you're seeing, it's something that's happening. It's a fact that emerges because every piece of the rocket belongs to a different moment in time and they're all stuck together, much like what we saw with the car. And two, rockets are always contracted, whether they're coming or going, unlike what happened in the optical illusion. The difference is that we humans always see the past no matter where we look, whereas the gods see the future ahead and the past behind. This discrepancy means that everything remains contracted under their all-seeing eyes. But setting these details aside, I think you can now guess why the gods hate Einstein. He caused a huge uproar in the divine community. Einstein had exposed an embarrassing secret to all of humanity. The gods have flaws, much like humans do. And that, of course, really hurt their pride. Even so, Einstein didn't understand why they were so upset. After all, seeing two desynchronized events or a squished rocket are fairly relative things. Squished in relation to what? Which is more real, the contracted rocket the god sees or the contracted god seen from the ship? This is the key point made by the second pillar of relativity, the principle of relativity. It tells us there is no absolute present, just as there's no absolute correct length with which to compare everything. In this image, is the rocket moving toward the asteroid or is the asteroid moving toward the rocket? We can't tell. All we have to work with is the relative distance between them. The same applies here. You always take your own present as a benchmark and then compare it with all the other objects moving around you. All you have to work with is the desynchronization between the two of you. There's no universal point of reference. All observers see the cosmos in an equally valid way, whether they're human or superhuman. Well, of course, until those annoying optical illusions get in the way. And that brings me to another question. If, on the one hand, distances happen to contract, and on the other we have to put up with light and sound distorting reality, then what would happen if we put it all together? What would a person see at ultra high speed? We'll find out in the next video. And remember, if you want more science, just hit the subscribe button. Thanks for watching.